Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for Venom: The Last Dance. Hello, I'm J-Law, but you can call me Justin. And if you're joining us for the first time, well, we are Geekcentric, a podcast covering the world of movies, TV shows, toys, collectibles, gaming, and all things Geekcentric. Joining me for today's symbiotic spoiler-free review. You know him, you love him, I love him. Darcy Hudson, welcome. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing better than I thought I would be after a movie like this. And that's not to say that I don't have some thoughts about it, but yeah, it's it was a thing that we did. It was an experience.
It was fun. The
Nonetheless.
best way to sum up what we did, it was a fun time.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun time. It was a fun time, partially because I got to do it with you. So, just saying. Like I said, we're going to be talking about Venom, The Last Dance, the final film in the Venom series. So they say, they always say that, but this is the completion to the trilogy, if you will, of movies. But before we kind of start talking about that, I wanted to kind of maybe kick things off with a little conversation, a little banter in and around this universe. Many people often mistakenly assume that Sony's Spider-Man universe is part of the MCU. Now, Tom Holland's Spider-Man films are a part of that, and that represents a partnership between Sony and Marvel to make those movies. However, everything else that we've seen outside of those films, so the other Spider-Man films and all of these sort of rogue gallery villain films, Morbius, this Venom series, Madam Web, those are totally and 100% owned by Sony. So I wanted to ask you, you're a Marvel comic expert. You kind of are, you always have a breath of positivity, and you kind of look at the different takes on how these studios approach these comic book characters, because you've kind of followed many of them. How do you feel about the direction Sony is taking with its standalone universe? And do you think the distinction from the MCU helps or hurts the storytelling potential for the characters like Venom or Morbius or Madam Web?
Well, you started off this question talking about how it's a collection of films about the Spider-Man rogues that he faces, and we talked about a bit about this on the drive back. But I feel like one of the biggest missteps that the Sony has taken is refusing to even acknowledge the fact that there is a Spider-Man in this universe. Again, a lot of these villains are only interesting because of how they interact with Spider-Man, how he either makes them go on the greatest hunt of their life, like maybe we might see with Kraven coming up soon, or want to become a hero, like we see with Venom go through that comic where he goes from the arch enemy of Spider-Man to idolizing him and wanting to be like him. Correct. So it's very, again, without even just a simple mention of a name or a picture in a newspaper would be all I need to, understand that this universe has a Spider-Man. Because again, I don't need to see him, but if we're going to do these origin stories, it'd be cool to lead up to something that maybe we would see them fight a Spider-Man. And to me, again, that's the biggest misstep that they've taken, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the like, to your point, they don't even mention him, right? Like outside of, obviously, spoilers for all the past Sony Venom films, but at the end of Let There Be Carnage, we did have this multiversal moment where Eddie as Venom sees Tom Holland Spider-Man on TV, and that kind of started seed planting a lot of potential opportunities, which have all been like sort of debunked and killed. Like, there is no intention of bringing over Tom Hardy as Venom into the MCU Spider-Man verse. So they say. And we that's, of course, we can always stand to be corrected if the studios decide to do that. But yeah, I think that this is the part that feels so disconnected about this. Like, it feels like they're really striving to want to do character focused stories about their villains, very similar to like a Joker, and with obviously a lot more gloss, not necessarily as much depressing grit that the Joker has, but there's a lot more superhero gloss, and the idea of talking about immoral characters and villains. Villains are very fascinating. All of us are very fascinated with them, but to your point, they're missing that key relationship that a villain has with a hero. with understanding. And like to your point, we don't need to see him. We just need to understand how he might fuel and motivate them to either be a villain, or to the point of what you said about Venom, an anti-hero, how he becomes a hero. You said it best, when we were driving down. It's really strange that in the first film, because you watched the first one, I watched the first one and you watched the
The
second
second
film.
one,
And so we
yes.
didn't do a whole rewatch, but we kind of like, between the two of us, were able to fill each other in. But yeah, in the first film, it really does establish Eddie Brock and Venom as sort of an anti-hero, not someone who's angry and sort of consumed by this symbiote. And it always seemed like to me that what made Eddie so big and so massive was this anger and rage he had to Spider-Man, and the symbiote was just fueling that and making him
Hmm.
bigger. But there's none of that in the first film, and sadly there's been really no reference outside of the Holland reference for Spider-Man in any of these movies. I think there was, like, in Morbius. Again, I haven't seen Morbius. Have you seen
Yeah.
Morbius? You
I
haven't,
have
right?
not yet either. That's one that I was afraid to watch after hearing the initial response to it.
And then the same with Madam Web. But I think now I'm like, you and I were talking about it. We're gonna do the dive. We're gonna go in. We'll
Hmm.
watch those movies. It'll be a little bit of hate watching, I think, because a lot of reviews have already come out and have basically given some of the worst reviews I've seen for a film. Which, again, trying to keep things positive here as we get into talking about Venom: The Last Dance. But yeah, we will visit those films and we'll definitely talk about it. But I feel like, yeah, like there's just a lack of consistency and structure, um, that you would expect from the MCU that Sony doesn't have. And I think
Hmm.
that they're really trying to push stories to help maintain a license agreement so that they can hold over the rights of Spider-Man, rather than really trying to do anything. The only thing Sony has done really well with the character outside of the MCU is Across the Spider-Verse.
Hmm.
That whole animated series is absolutely fantastic, and I really don't know how they were able to do that right, but they can't get their live action right. Like, I don't know if there was a bit of, like, suspending disbelief because it's animation. They can just do whatever they want with that story, and with live action, there's some sort of containment or reserve that they want to, like, try to maintain with it. I don't know, but again, not to say that they have all been bad, but yeah, they have definitely left me wanting more from
Hmm.
what I've seen from the Sonyverse. But I digress. I think it's time that we get into talking about this movie, because I think it kind of continues with some of what we were talking about, but also has some cool stuff. As I mentioned, we're talking about Venom: The Last Dance. I'm going to give you a little synopsis here. In Venom: The Last Dance, Tom Hardy returns as Venom, one of Marvel's greatest and most complex characters, for the final film in the trilogy. Eddie and Venom are on the run, hunted by both of their worlds, with the net closing in. The duo are forced into a devastating decision that will bring the curtains down on Venom and Eddie's last. Venom: The Last Dance stars Tom Hardy, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Juno Temple, Reese Ifans, Peggy Lou, Alana Ubach, and Stephen Graham. The film is directed by Kelly Marcel from a screenplay she wrote based on a story by Tom Hardy and Kelly Marcel. The film is produced by longtime, in association with Marvel, producer Avi Arad, and Matt Tolmach, Amy Pascal, who's also well known in association with the Marvel universe, Kelly Marcel, Tom Hardy, and Hutch Parker. Venom: The Last Dance hits theaters on October 25th. It's also in IMAX. Huge thanks to Sony Pictures Canada for inviting us out early to see this film in IMAX, which kind of helped to a certain degree with some of the bigger moments. I do recommend, if you have the opportunity and you are close to, you might as well see it in IMAX. It does fill the frame, which is really, really nice,
Hmm.
and you kind of feel like you're immersed in some of those scenes. So definitely recommend that. As usual, I have some pillars for us to talk about, what worked and what didn't work. We're talking about performances, visual effects, of course, and then we'll wrap things up with narrative. And then we'll close things out with our final thoughts and score. So let's kick it off with performances. If it's okay, I'll just kind of start with, I think, the absolute highlight of this entire trilogy and of this film is Tom Hardy's performance, uh, as Eddie Brock and as Venom. Again, it just highlights Tom Hardy's ability to balance the sort of intense, unpredictable dynamics between, like, of Eddie Brock and Venom. I think his portrayal is very and I use this word as punny as intended, symbiotic to the relationship. It's just it's so well melded. I think there's such a beautiful way that Tom captures the humor, and the inner conflict and the bond that is made between the characters, and he's done that really really well throughout these three films, and especially in this final one, you really see it, that duality that he brings, the energy, he's adding depth. I think it keeps the film super engaging,
Hmm.
even as the plot fumbles from here and there. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
I agree. I think he's the highlight.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're gonna go watch this movie, you're gonna go watch it for more Eddie Brock and Venom banter. Because to me, I mean, we also talked about this on the drive down, but the way that they have that inner monologue as he's walking and talking to himself is very reminiscent of the Deadpool in the comics, where it's his inner
Right.
voice that is kind of breaking the fourth wall, and it's very refreshing to get like an almost different take on that, where it is an internal monologue, but it is very much two personalities talking back and forth. And this, again, it's weird to say the chemistry because it is just him, but
Right.
the way he's able to create such two distinct characters and have these the way they butt heads and get along at times, it's very engaging. Like you said, he's the reason why you want to keep watching these movies, because he is
Mhm.
such a fun character to go on these adventures with.
Yeah, and I posted a tweet, and I referenced the fact that, this is the other buddy road trip style superhero film. And, that's totally in reference to Deadpool and Wolverine. That movie definitely had a lot of those elements. And here, this film has a lot of those elements as well. But rather than two separate actors, you have one actor playing two
Hmm.
characters, and he's constantly shifting in terms of who he is, and that energy that he's bringing. Again, I think he's so married to this character on a personal level. Like, Tom Hardy is so married to this character, and I think that it shows in his performance and his confidence, and in the fact that, we were talking about it. He's pretty much had a hand in most of the writing to a certain degree, and he's obviously an executive producer. And I think a lot of that has to do with that relationship that he has with the character, and also from a writing standpoint, I'm sure he's thinking about what the character would say, and
Hmm.
he's creating this persona. So yeah, I think, again, absolute highlight. I don't have anything else to say about any of the other characters outside of some things that I think were very generic, but I'll throw it to you, Darcy. Who else was a standout for you?
Again, I'm kind of on the page with you, where
Yeah.
unfortunately this one was a very Tom Hardy driven film, and he is the reason to go back. I will say I did enjoy Reese Ifans' character. I thought it was very interesting to
Yes.
cast Reese and
Yeah.
not go the Kurt Connor route and have him play
Yes.
this completely unrelated character with a sweet family, and
Hmm.
it lends itself to some fun moments. Again, Tom Hardy doing most of the heavy lifting, but
Yes.
he was a breath of fresh air. And like some of the other characters, where I felt like their stories were just kind of crammed in just to show us a bit of the other side, which, while important, I think could have been handled a bit better.
Yeah, I totally agree. Chiwetel is such a great actor, and he's absolutely phenomenal. And I think that, even though a lot of people will say Doctor Strange did him dirty because he hasn't come back as that iconic character of
Baron
um,
Mordo.
Baron Mordo, he's kind of in the shadows. It can definitely happen. He's come
Hmm.
back as a variation, but, like, again, there's just an option there, and I think that that film, that series knew how to treat that character. This was such a ancillary side character, so typical as well. Just the military guy
So
who
one note.
exactly.
Nothing new, no reinventing the wheel or anything with this
And I feel
character. It's
bad. I
just
feel bad for
100%.
Chiwetel. Yeah, it just feels like there was nothing to
And
really work with other than him bringing his own, like, performative energy. He was great. I just feel like, again, it was just so generic and so boring.
and I
Uh,
again, I could say the same thing about Juno Temple's character with
yes, thank
the
you.
again, military lab person who has a heart, but is working with the people who don't have a heart. And it's, again, very
Yes,
one
yes,
note. And it's a shame to see all these talented actors come to this project and they're given the bare minimum to work with, and they do their best with it. Like, they are enjoyable, but it's, again, nothing is being reinvented, and it's all very forgettable, unfortunately.
yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and someone also pointed out as well as we were leaving, that Juno Temple's in this, and then Who's the other
Christopher
guy?
Fernandez.
And
Yeah.
Cristo Fernandez is also in this. You know, they got two of the Ted Lasso. They just need a couple more, right? So maybe on the next round they'll make Jason Sudeikis, like an Eddie Brock character who's got a symbiote on him. I don't know, but yeah, I think we're both on the same page. I think if you're seeing this movie for performances, really it is Tom Hardy's film. I think he lovingly, you know, closes out this character's journey, and it works really really well, and to spend so much time with the two of them is phenomenal.
Hmm. Hmm.
Let's talk about visual effects, okay? Because there's obviously a lot of visual effects on this. How did you feel about it, though? How did you feel about what we were seeing? And again, we kind of talked about it. We did see this film in IMAX, so that kind of helped with some of that experience, kind of adding levity to some of those moments.
Hmm. Well, I gotta say, everything with Venom, they've finally perfected it after 3 movies. He looked the best he has up to
Hmm.
this point, I'd say, at least in this trilogy. Something about the way that it was the higher shine factor and less wrinkles to it really made it feel more like the symbiote I picture when I'm reading the comics and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Uh, there were some bigger set pieces though, where you start seeing like the budget being stretched a bit thin, I think, because
Hmm.
they were, I mean, we saw in the trailers that there are other symbiotes, and just how we see some of that come to fruition at times is just like, okay, this is a bit of a too big of a set piece for this moment. I feel like you kind of overstepped what you were trying to go for, and it shows at
It got
times.
too big for its
It got too
britches,
big at times,
right?
but again,
Yeah, yeah.
those smaller moments where it is a lot
Mhm.
of the Eddie and Venom talking back, I thought it looked fantastic. They really nailed the way that character comes together and transforms, stuff like that. So I really enjoyed
Yeah.
that aspect. But again, everything outside those smaller moments is where you start to see those effects a bit more.
Yeah, I think they put their graphics in the right places. I
Hmm.
think and the same can be said about where they used IMAX. They used IMAX in some really conventional places where it's like action, immerse you, but then there's like moments where it's just like land and city or something, and it's just full IMAX, and it's like that doesn't necessarily need to be in it, but it still feels immersive and conducive to this idea of putting you in this world.
Hmm.
So it's good. I think overall, like you said, like the visuals have always sort of been impressive. They definitely have gotten a lot better. Especially when you're bringing Venom to life and other symbiotes, like the fluid movement and the transformation is very well executed, and it kind of matches the sort of chaotic crazy nature of the character and the way it sort of wraps him and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I think the action sequences looked good at some instances, but to the exact point of what you were saying, some of it looked like, it was scaled too big for what it was, and it really did show that it was kind of, stretching a budget, if you will.
Hmm.
Things felt a little overstuffed in terms of like where effects were. Like there is this whole thing with Null that you've seen. If you've seen the trail, then you've seen it. It's obviously all CGI, so it's like, that is what it is. But I think, where they go heavy handed with that sort of visual effects, it's sort of sacrificing a sense of clarity for spectacle, right? Like it's a
Hmm.
sort of a magic trick. Don't focus on how little there is here in terms of narrative. Focus on all these visuals and visual
Yeah.
effects, and maybe that'll distract you. But it really didn't, in my opinion. And that's the thing that I think as audiences, we're all sort of getting a little bit smarter with that, in that we can recognize that. I think some people, maybe outside of us, they might just go to this and be very entertained with all of that. But you can sense when to your point, when they're going more heavy handed or over the top, it is to distract, it is to provide spectacle over the lack of substance that is there. And while, the CGI does enhance film intensity and kind of give a little bit more atmospheric, it just feels like, again, a lot of high gloss for something
Hmm.
that hasn't been very fleshed out or uh, thoughtful
Hmm.
overall. So I think the visual effects in a lot of ways are used as a bit of a crutch
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
kind of keep the progress going. So yeah, how about anything else in regards to CGI? Is that you feeling?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it all. Like a
Yeah.
lot of it was, like you said, it's meant to distract as opposed to engage. So it's a bit disappointing that that's the route they went with some of those things. But again, those smaller moments look great. So
Yes.
that's where almost a shining factor, where they did take the time to make these character moments land a
Mhm.
bit harder with this entirely CGI character coming out of a human character. So
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Those moments definitely hit, and I think even if the CGI was a little off, it's more forgiving because of the performative quality that you're
Hmm.
getting and the sort of emotive beats that it might be hitting. right?
Mhm.
Like I think that there again, as an audience, we're kind of getting a little bit better at understanding where to kind of suspend disbelief, right?
Mhm.
I don't necessarily go into movies looking for the flaws in the visual effects. It's when something happens that I feel like I'm taken out, and there's a couple instances like that through this film that will definitely have that for you.
Mhm.
All right, let's talk about the story, which I think for me, I have the biggest problems with. For yourself, though, why don't we? Darcy, why don't you kick things off here? How did you feel about this story?
Again, I love the story of Eddie and Venom's journey across, the country as they're trying to get back to where they're going. But it's the fact that mentioned in the synopsis they're being chased by both planets. I feel like one of those chases was unnecessary and also very underutilized. I mean, you mentioned Null in
Mhm,
the trailer and stuff like that. We expect he's gonna be a bit big, and just the way they pay off that character is one of the biggest letdowns, especially off the you mentioned the top of the thing. How is this gonna connect to the MCU? And Null is the creator of the Necrosword that Gore uses, and all this stuff that could have spiraled out of it. And we barely get anything with this character, and it's very disappointing, in my
sure.
opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah. To your point, there are some good qualities, and most of those qualities rely heavily on Tom Hardy playing this sort of back and forth between Eddie and Venom. I think that's where the highlight is of the story, and seeing that relationship bond. I think that's sort of the general misstep, I would say, not with just this film, but with this entire trilogy, is trying to really highlight that focus. I think the closest that we've had to that is number one because of the origin story and the
Hmm.
beginning of that relationship. And I really enjoyed actually that portion of it. I think they could have gone further with it. But
Hmm.
to your point as well, when you talked about CGI, things getting bigger than they necessarily needed to, where one felt like it could have been a bit more focused and not necessarily as large in scope, it went there with it, with Riot and stuff like that. And then it did the same thing again in Let There Be Carnage, and it went further because it was like, we need to shove Carnage into this movie. And very much it's the same here. The general lead up to what would be a final climactic thing, just it feels so rushed. I just feel like again the overall narrative is very uneven. There's moments of excitement and humor, as we were saying, but it's often overshadowed by these rushed, unfocused plot points. And the dynamic between Eddie and Venom remains the total heart of the film. It keeps you engaged. I just wanted to be with them. Do you know what I mean? Like I
Hmm.
didn't want anyone else. I just wanted to be with them. And if they were running, that's fine. But like I would just rather have been them and none of the other characters. In all
Hmm.
honesty, they added nothing. I think a lot of plot choices felt random, making the film feel like a really crazy ride. That didn't give a fully satisfying end to this journey. And I think despite these issues, though, overall, I think the film will be fun for fans like from an overall experience, but I wouldn't be going in to think about this as like a really good film, like a really great story. It
Hmm.
isn't. It is very loose, and I think all they really do is try to close out this symbiotic saga, if you will. Um, and I think they did that as best as they could, to the degree of what they had at their disposal. And on the note about Null, we didn't even talk about him as performances because you're absolutely right.
I don't
I
consider
don't I
what he
think
did was a
I feel
performance.
bad if this is a spoiler, but he is so useless and he is so underutilized that it's not really a spoiler because everyone already called it. Everyone just said like he's probably not going to be in it that much, and he wasn't. So it's really unfortunate that we got this hint of a character that could have been, again, as you pointed out, the connective tissue between the Sony Marvel Spider-Man universe into the MCU that we know and love. But I don't think that's going to happen. And I actually think it's probably all for the better that it
Hmm.
doesn't. I
Hmm.
honestly do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, so, again, I think a lot of my issues from the story too, like, the null point aside, when I talk about one of the sides not being necessary, it is that very one note side of the military
Hmm.
hunting our hero.
Hmm.
That's been done so many times before,
Hmm.
and they make us spend time with those characters to almost try and understand where they're coming from. But because they're so one note, it's like you don't care. Even by the end of the movie, when these grand sacrifices are being made,
Yeah.
I feel nothing because
Yeah.
these characters are just so conventional. It's like you could have done something more and gone against the thing where maybe the government for once isn't chasing the hero, the government is helping the hero because
Well,
they
that's
understand the
just
greater
it.
threat, which would have been,
Yes.
I think, a fun spin on it. Like start off, they're on the run. Oh wait, hold on, we're trying to help you. Take the movie in a new direction, and I think that would have been more refreshing almost because again, it's so one note to be like, oh, this person has powers, we must chase them type thing.
Yeah, it kind of comes down to the fact that we're forced to care about people that we weren't really given the chance to learn more about, right?
Hmm.
Like they
Hmm.
kind of come in with their preconceived uh archetypes and they don't really budge
They
from
don't
it. And
change from those.
and it's
Yeah.
like soon as Chiwetel is on screen, it's like you know his character, right?
Hmm.
You know, as soon as you're introduced to Juno Temple's character as Dr. Payne, it's like you know her character. You know the kind of character she is and how she fits into this story. You've already written the rest of it. And the funny thing is the way you've written it in your head, or the way at least I wrote it in my head, that's how they were. And you know, I didn't need to see the rest of the movie for that. I will say I didn't. I was really surprised though with the runtime of this. It's a 95-minute film, I think, is what I saw. Anyways, it's an hour and a half, and like I know the last one was an hour and a half, and I was like that felt rushed. I thought they would have learned and maybe give us a little bit more, like maybe push it to an hour and 40. But then again, it's like, what would they have added? Right?
Yeah, I think the runtime did not need to be extended because they wouldn't have known what to do with it really
Yeah.
at that point.
And usually when a movie is that short, it is about things being slimmed down because they are getting overexhausted.
Hmm.
Right. Usually in
Hmm.
most cases, right? Because you know, unless it is like an animated film or some other film that is designed to be a 90-minute film, like these other films that you go in expecting closer to 2 hours, but they're actually surprisingly like 90 minutes, you can see that stuff has been
Hmm.
done to like get it to a more concise
There was a point in the
time.
production where they're like, "Oh, we've gotten too big for our britches here. Let's just scale it back and try and first
Exactly.
finish something."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've talked this through. Let's wrap things up with our overall thoughts on Venom: The Last Dance. We're going to be rating this on a score of 1 to 5 symbiotes.
Okay.
Darcy, kick it off.
Again, I think we've said it 100 times. If you're going to see this movie, you're going to see it for Tom Hardy. If you're a fan of Venom and symbiotes in general, you'll have a fun time. Again, that's not saying it's a great movie. By all
Mhm.
means, it is. It falls short in many ways. But if you're going in to watch Venom and Eddie banter back and forth like an old married couple, and just watch symbiotes do cool things
Yeah,
because they're symbiotes,
yeah,
always friggin' cool, you'll enjoy the movie. Again, the lackluster performances are forgettable, but the fun I had throughout the movie is not. So I will look back positively on this,
sure.
and for that reason, It is one of my. I think it's. I go back and forth right now. I have since rewatched the first movie, so
Yeah.
I'm going back whether or not I like the first or the third more. But to me, they are equal. So I'll be
Yes,
giving about. I'm sitting around a 3.5 out of 5 symbiotes because again, I'm a diehard fan of comics.
for
So
sure.
seeing these characters come to life is always such a joy for me. And
Yeah,
again, Tom Hardy does such a good job bringing Venom to life. He really carries this whole trilogy.
yeah, yeah. I'm with you. I feel like the first one is my favorite of the trilogy, and this is a very close, if not exact, like copy
Number
second
two, yeah.
to number two. I think overall, you know, like you're saying, there's fun in there. There's entertaining. I'm not gonna lie. There were some moments that I laughed out loud. I
Hmm.
LOL'd in the
Hmm.
theater. And I was definitely like, whoa, that was cool moment. So it's entertaining. It is flawed like no tomorrow though. And I think that is to be expected. And I think this is, you know, conclusion to the symbiotic saga. I think Tom Hardy's performance is the reason to watch this. It's fun, the fun dynamic between Brock and Venom. It just keeps the film engaging. You want to stick around with them. And even when the plot feels like it's rushed or uneven, you know, it's really about them. And while, you know, again, it's not without its issues, you know, I think fans are going to appreciate it. Like you said, fans are going to appreciate this. And we were in a fan screening, so we heard a lot of people chuckling and laughing and stuff like that. But we also heard the other half of that when we got out of the theaters.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's humor, there's action, and it does feel very fitting for this series. If there's anything, the same things that we've talked about here, I would say are issues with all of the films. So that's a consistency across
Hmm.
the board. I gave Venom a 2.5 out of 5. because I really did want it to go further. I would be giving this one, Venom: The Last Dance, a 2.5. I still think that, again, it's 50%. I know it's
Mhm.
not nothing.
Oh yeah, it's not unwatchable.
It's not
50% is not
unwatchable.
unwatchable by any
Definitely.
means.
Again, I haven't seen Madam Web or Morbius, but I imagine if I was a fan of those characters and I watched that and I hated it, I would probably say that's unwatchable and
Mhm.
not. So, again, having not seen it, I'll wait till I see it. So, yeah, I'm going to give this a 2.5 out of 5 symbiotes. And I think that has a lot to do with Tom Hardy's relationship with the character and wanting to bring this character to life and being so passionate about it. I think that shows. And I'm always a firm believer. If you love what you're doing and if you invest that energy and passion into it, it exudes. And audience members like us and people who watch it, they feel that.
Mhm.
I don't know if I felt that from the rest of the film, if that makes sense. I think
Yep.
it feels a
Yep.
little rushed. So that is my final thoughts. Anything else before we wrap here, Dars?
Again, I just, as you're talking about like how there were moments that made you go, wow, there were moments that you were laughing at.
Mhm.
I thought back and like this movie feels like early superhero movies before MCU reinvented the wheel. This is like your early Fox X-Men or
Yeah.
Fantastic Four almost. So there is a lot of campiness and
Yeah.
cheesiness to it, but you watch it because it's just a fun, cool superhero movie. Like that's,
Yes.
to me, that's the mentality I got from this trilogy.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with that. I think again, you could argue, and there's probably people that would argue that the MCU has its own box and its own sort of style, and
Oh
it's
yeah, for sure.
absolutely true.
For sure.
There is a box there. There's a formula for like origin stories and so on and so forth. But I totally agree with you. I feel like this feels like a dated superhero film predating the MCU, and it feels
Mhm.
more conventional. Like when people talk about superhero films being stuck in a box, I think of something like this. I would think
100%.
of something like,
100%.
even though it's not a superhero film, it's supposed to be a villain thing. The way that they're going about doing it is definitely very conventional,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's we just want more. And
Yeah.
I think that's at the end of the day, like, not to kind of go on a rant here, but that is my biggest thing with Sony, because I think they can do great stuff. They have done great stuff that I've actually really enjoyed from a film perspective. I would just like to see that level of story and narrative investment in these characters, because if you really want to do films that are right by them, look at what you did really well with Across the Spider-Verse, that and
Mhm.
Into the Spider-Verse. That was a story driven with beautiful aesthetics. You can achieve that. It doesn't need to be like, not everything needs to make you $1 billion, right? It just needs to be able to strike a chord with fans that feels genuine, and it doesn't feel like you're just doing this because you want my money. That's sort of it at the end of the day. I feel
Mhm.
like a
Mhm.
lot of these films are just, we're going to make a Morbius film, so we'll get, a lot of money from people, and we're going to cast Jared Leto. It's got all the right ideas, it's just not executed properly.
Mhm.
Same thing with Madam Web. It's like, you're going to tap into a multiverse. Awesome. Everyone's tapping into a multiverse. And then it's just, it's absolute dog shit. With Venom, you have such great pieces on the board. It's just poor execution.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
really hope that that Sony could learn from Marvel and maybe form a stronger relationship that can inevitably allow them to assist, like Marvel to assist Sony with telling these stories. But
Mhm.
we'll have to wait and see. Who knows? Or just, you know what, Marvel, just throw down the billions of dollars and buy back Sony. I buy back Spider-Man. I think it'll
Yeah.
be well worth it in the long run. All right. Well, that's it for our spoiler-free review for Venom: The Last Dance. We hope you enjoyed it. Again, a huge thanks to Sony Pictures Canada for inviting us out. I hope they'll invite us out again after this review. It's very honest. I'm not going to mince words, but
Mhm.
we are grateful for the opportunity to see it. And I am actually very interested in seeing Craven. I like Aaron Johnson. Again, it's Aaron Taylor Johnson, Craven. Like, there's good pieces there. What is it going to give us at the end of the day?
Mhm.
I don't know. We will
Mhm.
find out. Hopefully, we'll be invited. We can provide you with that review. But if you want to let us know your thoughts on Venom: Last Dance when you see it, October 25th, it is out today in theaters. So if you see this film and you want to let us know your thoughts, and you think, hey, those guys at Geekcentric, they are totally crazy. This movie slaps so hard. You can reach out to us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or if that feels like you're being struck by lightning, leaving your arm completely impaled, um, you can reach out to us on Twitter at GeekcentricYT or on Instagram at wearegeekcentric. We also have a TikTok, and our handle there is We Are Geekcentric. But keep in mind, we have a ton of great episodes out for you to enjoy, including a variety of spoiler-free reviews. But our most recent stuff right now is in the realm of Agatha All Along. Yes, we have our ongoing watch club for Marvel Television's Agatha All Along. We have our coverage for the first 6 episodes out now. Episode 7, which was a complete banger, you will be able to listen to that later today. It'll be available on podcast feeds, so be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/geekcentric. We have a ton of interviews. Hopefully more to come. We're working on some stuff, so we'll see what happens. But you know what? Until then, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Darcy, thank you so much for joining. And as we say,
Laters.
peace.